The guard's keys jangle against the rusty cell door as I'm finally released after 847 days of hell. My legs nearly buckle beneath me as I step into the blinding Caribbean sunlight, a free man at last. But freedom feels hollow when you've lost everything that matters. My name is Michael Reeves, and 3 years ago, I was just a single father from Ohio trying to give my daughter a better life. I never imagined I'd end up framed for drug trafficking in a foreign prison, fighting not just for my freedom, but for my very survival. If you're watching this, I want you to know that what happened to me could happen to anyone. My story isn't just about injustice, it's about the lengths a parent will go to return to their child. If this resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey of rebuilding what was taken from me. Your support means everything as I try to piece my life back together. I still remember the day everything changed. The smell of salt air, the sound of my daughter Emma's laughter as we packed for what was supposed to be a simple vacation, a chance for us to reconnect after her mother's death 2 years prior. Emma was 12 then, all gangly limbs and braces, with her mother's eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom in the world. "Dad, did you pack the sunscreen?" she'd asked, meticulously checking our vacation list. "Always the organized one, my Emma." "Right here, kiddo," I'd replied, tossing the bottle into our suitcase. "This trip is going to change everything for us." I had no idea how prophetic those words would become. The resort in Santo Domingo had seemed perfect online, affordable beachfront accommodations, activities for Emma, and a chance for me to decompress after 18 months of working double shifts at the auto plant to make ends meet. A single dad doing his best. That's all I was. Our first 3 days were paradise. Emma collected seashells along the shore while I watched from under a palm tree, nursing a cold beer and feeling the weight of responsibility lift from my shoulders for the first time in years. We ate fresh seafood every night, and Emma's smile, God, her smile had returned. After losing her mother, those smiles had become rare treasures. "This is the best day ever, Dad," she'd said on our third evening, her face illuminated by the sunset as we walked along the beach. I'd pulled her close, kissing the top of her head, memorizing the moment. It would be the last peaceful one we'd share for a very long time. The knock came at 5:17 a.m. I remember checking the digital clock by the bedside, thinking it must be a mistake. Emma was still asleep in the adjoining room of our suite. When I opened the door, 6 police officers burst in, shouting in Spanish too rapid for my basic understanding. They tore through our belongings while I stood frozen in shock, wearing only boxers and a t-shirt. Emma appeared in her doorway, eyes wide with terror. "Daddy?" Her voice small, confused. "It's okay, baby. Just a misunderstanding," I'd said, trying to keep my voice steady as an officer emerged from the bathroom holding a package wrapped in plastic, 2 kilos of cocaine that I had never seen before. They didn't let me say goodbye to her. That's what haunts me most. As they handcuffed me and dragged me from the room, Emma's screams echoed down the hallway. "Daddy! Daddy!" The sound still wakes me from nightmares, her voice growing fainter as they pushed me into a police van. I learned later that the resort manager had called my sister back in Ohio. Melissa had flown down immediately to bring Emma home while I was processed through a judicial system I didn't understand, in a language I barely spoke. The first month in detention was a blur of confusion and terror. The public defender assigned to me spoke broken English and seemed more interested in processing my case quickly than proving my innocence. I kept insisting someone had planted the drugs, but who would believe an American tourist over local authorities? "You were seen talking with known drug dealers on the beach," the prosecutor claimed during my preliminary hearing. "They were selling coconuts and bracelets." I'd protested, remembering the friendly vendors who'd approached tourists all day long. The evidence against me was circumstantial but damning. The drugs were found in my room. A hotel employee claimed he'd seen me accepting a package the day before. My fingerprints were on the bathroom cabinet where the drugs were hidden. Of course they were, it was my bathroom. I was sentenced to 5 years in Njao prison, a facility notorious for overcrowding and violence against foreign inmates. The American embassy provided minimal assistance, explaining that while they could ensure I wasn't being mistreated, they couldn't intervene in the legal proceedings of a sovereign nation. That first night in the general population remains the most terrifying of my life. 60 men crammed into a space designed for 20. The stench of unwashed bodies, sewage, and despair. I was immediately targeted as the new gringo, an outsider, potentially wealthy, definitely vulnerable. "Give me your shoes," a heavily tattooed man demanded within my first hour. I hesitated only briefly before removing my Nike running shoes. They were just things. Survival meant picking your battles. Sleep was impossible that night. I sat with my back against the wall, knees pulled to my chest, watching as men gambled with homemade dice and fought over scraps of food. All I could think about was Emma. Was she okay? Did she think I'd abandoned her? Would I ever see her again? The prison operated on its own economy. Everything had a price: protection, extra food, clean water, even toilet paper. My American citizenship made me both a target and a potential resource. Inmates assumed I had money or connections on the outside. What saved me during those early weeks was Marco, a middle-aged Dominican man serving time for fraud. He spoke excellent English and took pity on me after witnessing a particularly brutal beating I received when I accidentally sat in someone else's designated spot during mealtime. "You won't survive without help," Marco told me bluntly as he helped me clean blood from my face. "I'll teach you what you need to know, but it will cost you." The currency he wanted wasn't money, it was English lessons for his son who visited monthly. It seemed a small price for survival. Under Marco's guidance, I learned the unwritten rules of Njao. Which guards could be bribed? Which areas belonged to which prison gangs? How to make my meager food rations last. Most importantly, I learned Spanish, not the tourist Spanish of ordering meals and asking directions, but prison Spanish. The language of threats and alliances, of begging and bargaining. Meanwhile, my connection to Emma dwindled to sporadic phone calls. International calls from prison were expensive and limited to 5 minutes. Hearing her voice was both salvation and torture. "When are you coming home, Daddy?" she'd ask during those first months, her voice breaking. "Soon, baby." "I'm working on it," I'd lie, not wanting her to know the depth of my helplessness. As months stretched into a year, our conversations changed. Emma's voice deepened slightly. Her interests shifted. She talked about new friends, new teachers. Life was continuing without me. She was growing up, and I was missing it all. Melissa did her best, sending me photos and updates. She'd hired a local attorney to appeal my case, draining her savings in the process. But appeals moved slowly, and evidence of my innocence remained elusive. The turning point came 18 months into my sentence. A new inmate arrived, Carlos, a former police officer imprisoned for corruption. During his processing, he recognized me. "You're the American from the resort setup," he said matter-of-factly as we stood in the water line one morning. My heart nearly stopped. "What did you say?" Carlos looked around cautiously before continuing in a low voice. "The drug bust at Playa Grande Resort. I wasn't involved, but I know who was. It was a scheme between hotel security and local dealers. They needed a tourist to take the fall for a shipment gone missing. Hope flared for the first time in months. Will you testify? Tell my lawyer?" Carlos laughed bitterly. "And get my throat cut? No. But I can tell you names, dates. Maybe your people on the outside can do something with that." That night, I wrote everything down on paper smuggled from the prison administrative office. Names of corrupt officers. The hotel security chief who Carlos claimed had orchestrated similar setups before. Dates of drug shipments that aligned with my arrest. Getting the information to Melissa required calling in every favor I'd accumulated in prison. Marco helped me bribe a guard to mail the letter. 3 agonizing weeks passed before I received Melissa's response. She'd taken the information to a journalist who specialized in exposing corruption in Caribbean tourism. For the next 6 months, while the journalist investigated, life in prison grew increasingly dangerous. Word had somehow spread that I was building a case. Twice I was ambushed in the shower area, leaving me with a broken rib and knife wound in my shoulder. I began sleeping in shifts with 2 other inmates who also feared for their lives, one keeping watch while the others rested. Emma's 13th birthday passed. Then her 14th. Our phone calls became less frequent as the cost became prohibitive for Melissa, who was now essentially raising my daughter. The photos showed a young woman emerging, no longer the little girl I'd left behind. In one picture, she stood beside a science fair project that had won first place. Her smile was confident, but her eyes held a sadness that tore at my heart. She was learning to live without me. The breakthrough came suddenly. The journalist had published a major exposé in both Dominican and international media, detailing corruption at multiple resorts including mine. 3 police officers were arrested. Hotel security personnel were implicated. Most importantly, another tourist had been arrested in a similar setup just months after me, but his case had been quickly dismissed when his wealthy family hired private investigators. My case was reopened. Evidence was re-examined. The hotel employee who had testified against me recanted, admitting he'd been paid to lie. The prosecution, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, suddenly became cooperative. After 847 days in Nijao prison, I was released with an official apology from the Dominican government and compensation that amounted to roughly $100 per day of wrongful imprisonment. The money meant nothing. I just wanted to go home. The flight back to Ohio was surreal. Clean clothes felt strange against my skin. The abundance of food on the airplane tray seemed impossible after years of scarcity. I kept expecting someone to shout that a mistake had been made, to feel handcuffs around my wrists again. Melissa and Emma waited at the airport arrival gate. I almost walked past them. The girl, no, young woman, standing beside my sister couldn't be my Emma. She was taller, her face thinner, her eyes older. But when she saw me, her expression crumpled into that of the little girl I remembered. "Daddy," she cried, running toward me. And then she was in my arms, solid and real, her tears soaking my shirt as mine dampened her hair. "I'm sorry," I whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry I left you." "You didn't leave," she said fiercely, pulling back to look at me. "You were taken. And you came back. You came back to me." Reintegration has been its own journey. The world moved on while I stood still. Technology advanced. Emma's childhood vanished. My job was long filled by someone else. PTSD makes me jump at loud noises and panic in crowded spaces. Some nights I still wake up believing I'm back in that cell. But we're rebuilding. Emma and I are learning to be father and daughter again. I've started speaking at criminal justice reform events, sharing my story to highlight the vulnerability of Americans abroad and the need for stronger consular protections. The compensation money is funding Emma's college savings and therapy for us both. I've learned that freedom isn't just about being physically unrestrained. It's about reclaiming your narrative, your relationships, your future. Every day I work to deserve this second chance, to make up for the time stolen from us. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: systems fail. Justice isn't guaranteed. But human connection, the love between a parent and child, the unexpected kindness of strangers like Marco, the determination of family like Melissa, that's what carries us through impossible circumstances. I don't know what the future holds for Emma and me. The scars we carry are deep. But each morning when I wake up in a bed instead of a concrete floor, when I can walk outside without permission, when I can call my daughter anytime just to hear her voice, I know that whatever challenges come next, we'll face them together. Freedom has never tasted sweeter. If my story has touched you, please consider supporting organizations that help wrongfully imprisoned Americans abroad. And if you'd like to follow my ongoing journey of healing and advocacy, subscribe to this channel. Your support reminds me that even in our darkest moments, we're never truly alone. Thank you for listening. This is Michael Reeves, no longer prisoner number 4873, but simply a father finding his way home.